to this Regional Transport Committee meeting on Friday the 4th, 2023. It's just...
Oh, it's the 4th. That's the 5th.
It's the 5th, sorry.
Yeah.
What I've got in front of me is wrong.
Oh, yeah, it's wrong.
Anyway,
Sorry.
I won't repeat what Councillor Kerr said before regarding a fried brain. Okay, it is Friday afternoon. I'd like to move through the proceedings relatively quick. Unfortunately, our regular chair, Martin Williams, cannot be here in person. He's got more pressing needs to attend to. So we would like to start with a karakia, and then I'll go through the proceedings. Api, would you please look like to open us?
Kia ora no tātou. Back in my younger days, one of our kaumātua Wītatau Huata, who was a canon in our church, would always say to us, repeat after me, please. Mati atua matua.
Mati atua matua.
Mati atua tama.
Mati atua tama.
Mati atua wairua tapu.
Mati atua wairua tapu.
Tātou katoa.
Tātou katoa.
E manaki.
E manaki.
E arahi.
E arahi.
E manaki.
E manaki.
I tēnei rangi.
I tēnei rangi.
Āmene.
Āmene.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Actually, a very nice way of doing it.
It's lovely.
Really good. Excellent. Thank you very much, Api. Are there any apologies apart from our regular chair? If there's none, that's accepted. Are there any notices? No notices? Okay, I would just like to quickly go through housekeeping. I'm always a bit conflicted what should go first, but so this is live streamed, this meeting, so that we're all aware. It can be seen on Facebook. And an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. The shaking is long and strong, and we'll discuss amongst ourselves if that's the case, what is long and strong. But when the shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit and proceed immediately towards Napier Hill along Dalton Street to Dolphin Park. Continue up the steps to Cameron Road. Evacuation. If an emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area on the grass at the corner of Dalton and Vautier Street. And that's right over there by the trees. Emergency exits are clearly signed posters, and you can point and you can see where they are. The council chamber is currently designed as a public place, and the council's policy is that 1 metre physical distance is required. I'm not sure whether that's still the case, but hey, it is here. Toilets are actually through the foyer at the back of the building here. Okay, let us proceed. Are there any conflict of interest declarations in regards to the items that will be on the agenda today? None, that's great. Then we'll have the confirmation of February the 10th, February 2023 minutes. Hopefully you've all read them in depth, making sure that they're all correct.
And remember them.
And remember them, of course. Well, I was on the 10th of February. It was before the horrible date, so you should be as clear as anything that time. Anything after that was downhill. Okay. Have I got a mover? Yep, and a seconder? Okay, thank you. All in favour to accept these minutes as true and correct? Say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Okay, then we come to the deputation of the Hawke's Bay Airport and regarding the Northern Roundabout. Have we got someone speaking for us?
Indeed.
We have. Great. You have got the floor.
Okay. So has everyone got our PowerPoint slides to view?
Not yet. If you just can hold that. No, that will be shared with you, then you can see where they're at. Okay. You may proceed.
All right, so slide 1 has a lovely, I can't see it, but has a lovely picture of our airport with a gorgeous sunset setting in behind. So kia ora and good afternoon to everyone. I assume you can hear me quite clearly.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, good. For those that have not met me, my name is Rob Stratford, CEO of the Hawke's Bay Airport, and it's a pleasure to be here, my first Transport Committee meeting, to share with you our case for improving accessibility to Hawke's Bay Airport so we can better deliver on our role as a lifeline transport asset for Hawke's Bay. So slide 2, please. So what is this all about? And what is Hawke's Bay Airport seeking? So firstly, Hawke's Bay Airport's a critical regional transport asset for the region, and we are seeking support from this committee for a second road access into and out of the airport. Slide 3, please. Hawke's Bay plays a critical role in the region, supporting people and businesses, their lives and livelihoods, and playing a critical role in Hawke's Bay's activity, both in terms of our business as usual, which is passenger and freight, but also in terms of an emergency. The airport is diversifying. It's a growing entity. It's leading New Zealand and Australia in its ability with sustainability. And it's also helping to increase Hawke's Bay's economic growth and resilience. Slide 4, please. We were well prepared for Gabrielle. We did, in fairness, take some learning from Auckland Airport, and we were fully operational throughout the cyclone. The airport facilitated civil defence, military and police response efforts, where road access across the region was obviously severely impacted. 1,600 locals within Hawke's Bay visited the airport on Wednesday, I think that was the 15th of February, connecting on Wi-Fi, charging devices, and obviously contacting loved ones who were very keen to understand what was happening in the region. We've continued to work hard to increase passenger services to support the region while our state highway network has been compromised. Slide 5, please. So the key learnings for the airport: we must ensure our resilience, which means we need to build redundancy into our airport infrastructure and our access so that our critical function as a regional lifeline utility is not compromised, and we can therefore fully support the regional response, fully support the regional emergency response. There is a potential exposure to the airport with a single point of access, and we're also looking to expand our airside capacity so that passenger and air freight services can be maintained alongside a full-blown civil, military and police emergency activity. Slide 6, please. In the event Watchman Road becomes impassable, road access to the airport is severely compromised and there's no alternative route in or out. The current roading around parts of the airport is also not capable of fully supporting heavy military vehicles. Slide 7, please. The solution is a second road access point via a roundabout on State Highway 2, just south of Curfew Road, at the northern end of the airport site. Now this is shown on the diagram, new roundabout with a little circular symbol with a couple of access points to it. Slide 8, please. The benefits are clear. New roundabout will improve resilience. It provides better capacity for heavy vehicles and means we can improve our part in any civil emergency, and of course improves health and safety. Slide 9, please. The Regional Recovery Program is an opportunity to improve access and resilience of our Hawke's Bay Airport. It is also a good fit with the Resilience Infrastructure Workstream within the Regional Recovery Framework. Slide 10, please. From Hawke's Bay Airport's point of view, Cyclone Gabrielle has proven the need for a second access point at the airport. That's why, in terms of our next steps, we will be engaging with the Regional Recovery Agency to ensure this project is prioritised within the Resilience Infrastructure Work Programme. We're at the very early stages of this, and a full business case will need to be developed. And clearly, we appreciate this opportunity to present to the committee and to receive, hopefully, your support. So thank you. That's it from me. I think I've kept that nice and short and sharp.
Thank you very much, Rob. That's much appreciated. Have you got any questions?
Only through you, Mr. Chair, only to our staff of what are the next steps. So we've had this deputation. What happens now?
That's a good question. Staff are just moving around to the microphone.
Hello. Thank you for the question, Councillor Kerr. Look, I think in terms of next steps, the most logical one I see is we look at how we can build this into the RLTP and or whether or not that sits within the RLTP or the recovery plans. I would hazard a guess, and quite keen for confirmation from Waka Kotahi, that something such as this would logically sit in the RLTP.
Yes.
Yes. In which case, we can build it in. And the proposed time for consultation on a draft RLTP is December this year at this time. So we've got plenty of scope to build that one in.
And for those who are online, the answer put to Waka Kotahi was in support. So, Martin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think actually Mayor Craig was first, but I've got a proposed recommendation to come at the end, which may help. So, Mayor, happy to.
Little first, please.
Yep. Kia ora, Rob. Thank you for that presentation. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Hawke's Bay Airport. I've been flying out of a few others lately, and it's just a wonderful place, Hawke's Bay, to fly out. You don't realise that until you go to other ones. And so, hey, look, I think it's a no-brainer from health and safety reasons. I've actually been in an ambulance coming from Wairoa and had to go past the airport and then back to it. I'd hate to have my last breath just by that old turn-off. And then, and never forget the access, the previous access did go in there where you want it pretty much. So it can be done. And I've often thought, you make a wrong turn coming to the airport and you've got to go all the way to Bayview. So this is a really good option as well for safety and get rid of that frustration of people that might have made a mistake, don't have to go all the way and come back again. So I think it's great and fully supportive from a Wairoa point of view.
Any other comments from the floor?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I agree with me little. I think this is an opportunity and absolutely needs to happen. I think it's important that we both get into the RLTP and also to the Hawke's Bay Recovery Plan through your locality plans. And so I think that Martin's probably got something, resolution that covers both areas. Thank you.
You've read my mind, and Chair, if I could just propose that the recommendation is that we receive the deputation, but I think we could add and supports the proposal for a second roundabout through regional recovery planning and assessment in our RLTP process.
Perfect.
I can read that again if that would help.
Yep.
And supports the proposal for a second roundabout
Yep.
through regional recovery planning and assessment in our RLTP process. And I'd be happy to move that.
Happy to
For a sec.
second.
Mayor Hazelhurst, the seconder.
While you're here, you're at.
Would you like to speak to it, Martin?
Just very briefly, thank you, Chair, and just to acknowledge the immediacy of the support. I mean, I was one of those people trying to connect on Wednesday the 15th at the airport. It is an absolute lifeline resource. It's proven its case and worth in the connection to your freight and logistics hub to the north, and for all the reasons that you've shared along with Mayor Craig. I think it deserves our full backing as a resilience, fundamentally a resilience strategy for our recovery.
Thank you.
No, all been said, thank you.
All being said?
Yep.
On that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Yep. And Mayor Craig Little raised his hand in favour, just so that everybody knows. Thank you. Oh, well, that's great. Thank you very much, Rob, and I think that's the outcome you were seeking, hopefully.
Yes, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and a lovely opportunity for me to make a first appearance to this committee also.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we now go to item number 5, follow-ups from the previous regional transport meetings. Who's taking that paper? You, Bryce?
No, I believe that would be the governance team, Chair.
I've just asked Leanne to come down, but I wasn't here when this was written.
Okay.
If there's any questions.
And then we just go straight to questions. If anyone's got any comments, questions, please do. Give you another 30 seconds. If not, then we move to the next item. We accept this.
Yep. Need someone to move it? Yeah.
Okay. Have I got a movement? Councillor Taylor and Mayor Hazelhurst. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll go to the next item, which is the RTC terms of reference and member appointments. That's item number 6. Okay. Is that Leanne as well? It's Friday afternoon. Our staff may have gone home.
Chair, yes, I do believe that is governance.
Yeah, she's just sitting in this room.
Perfect.
Okay, we'll wait for that then. You're not making it easy for the chair. What we could do. Okay. Well, the next item is quite an important item. It'll take some time, and I would like to go through that in one go rather than break it up. Good afternoon.
Kia ora. Sorry I'm late. I thought the airport would take much longer.
I know we're a very, very compliant bunch here.
Very. So I'm just here to answer any questions that anybody has about the terms of reference and the appointments. Other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay, we have a question. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. This is more just a fine tuning. Especially for the advisory members non-voting, is it appropriate that we have or alternate written in the terms of reference? So for example, if David couldn't make it today, then his alternate is able to come as a party that's a non-voting, so there's no decision-making parts, it's just frees up, if I can use David as an example, from having to be here and utilise other members of your team, who are often here anyway.
They are here anyway, but no, that would formalise that. That's good, thanks.
Yes, I'm happy to add that in.
And that will also be the case for Matt Broderick, who
Yes.
He's
I
just retired.
understand.
He's an advisory member as well.
He's just retired.
Yes, yes. So just if we had the words or alternate against each of those names,
Yes.
that frees those organisations to bring the right person.
Yes, exactly.
What's the deal with what?
Happy with that.
Okay, that sounds good. Ian is happy with that.
I don't even know.
Sean, you're online, Sean.
I'm not sure who's first, but I'll go to Mayor Little first. You're on mute.
Martin, I'd like to hear from first because he was up there first.
No, we are being kind to each other today, Craig. So,
But we do have 1 and a 2 on our screen. I don't know, you obviously don't have that.
No, we don't have that.
It just shows Wire is leading the way again.
Mayor Little, the chair rules here and you have got the floor.
It's very kind of you to make a point like that. Just on the elected members of the councillors and the councils and that, you've got here 1 representative and 1 alternative. We've got to make it really quite clear there that you only actually get 1 vote. And I've got to put Mayor Sandra and Deputy Mayor Tanya, pull them up on this because they did one day put the item up and second it themselves, and you've just got to make sure. So they are quite cunning, that council, but you've just got to put them into line. But so if you could just put a note there that councils only have 1 vote.
And that's well spotted. And the reason why I've actually have seen them across from me, so I can keep an eye on them because
Yeah, good,
yeah,
great.
absolutely. It's not just on
Thank you,
this
Mayor
issue,
Little,
you know.
for raising that important matter.
Yeah, perfect.
Councillor Williams.
yeah, thank you. Look, there's a couple of things. Just a correction we need. It's Rob Stratford, for Hawke's Bay Airport, not Rob Stanton. Now, there's something that I'm going to be troubling Leanne with that's been driving me, frankly, around the twist for the last 6 months. And we've been fiddling with the wording on active transport. The fact is that on the 16th of November, we, after a proposal by me for the item on active transport, adopted as a council the following wording, and I'm going to say it once, and I'm going to say it the last time ever, and this is the wording that we adopted, and it needs to be. The wording for item 6 is this: promote and plan for active transport in the region. That's what it needs to say, and that's the only thing it needs to say. Promote and plan for active transport in the region. That's the wording we adopted on the 16th of November, and it was put to this committee on the 10th of February. There was an attempt to adjust that on at the 29 March meeting at the council, which this paper refers to, and I moved it back to promote and plan for then. That's what it needs to be. The other word that needs to change is in item 5. It is not plan and provide for, it's plan and advocate for. So item 5 is plan and advocate for emissions reductions throughout the region. And item 6, as I've just read it, promote and plan for. And I would like to see the terms of reference, if it is to be approved today with the other changes dealing with the road safety program, etc. With those changes, please.
Okay, so you're in luck, Councillor Williams, that it's Friday and I lost the will to live already on 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Because otherwise I would have taken you up on point number 6, because to plan and provide is an active undertaking on behalf of active transport. What you're proposing is not, but I'm not going to take that any further because I just haven't got the stomach for it. That's the only thing that I have to say. Anyway, we'll move on. Anyone else has got any?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Leanne, does that also include me as a iwi? Do I have a iwi?
Yes.
Alt?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Good. Anything else? Otherwise, we will adopt them as they now have been altered, or
Yep.
have we got a seconder? Mayor Craig Little? You've moved it, haven't you, Martin? Correct. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? And I just spotted out of the left eye, Mayor Craig Little, it was only Mayor Sandra Hazelhurst who voted, and it wasn't Councillor Kerr. I've made sure of that. Okay.
Keep an eye on them for the whole meeting.
I'll keep an eye on them, yeah, for sure. Okay, then we go to item number 7, NZTA Regional Director Update, Linda Stewart. You've got the floor.
Thank you. Wow, that's like the biggest cursor ever. Here we go. Nice one. Oh, thank you very much, Chair. I was just reflecting on my way here about the last time that we all sat together, the week before Cyclone Gabrielle, and the kind of time that's passed between then and now almost feels a little bit surreal. For everything that you've all been through individually and as councils, but your community have been through, all that you've had to respond to personally as well as professionally. I can only imagine just how relentless it's been for you all. Everything you've had to lead and undoubtedly front, and some pretty hard stuff I would imagine out there on a day-to-day basis. And as well, though, all that's been resolved. And I know that that can seem quite hard to at times fathom, given all that still lies ahead of us all. But I just really wanted to recognise that I think it's a kind of pause for reflection for us as an RTC. I would as well just like to thank you all for your regular engagement and very regular feedback too. You know, I can't say I think we got quite a bit right, didn't get everything right, but the feedback is what helps us respond better, more agile, meet the community needs. And I genuinely appreciate that from you and your officers. Also as well, just want to celebrate all the work of your officers, your team and your community on the ground. It's quite incredible to think about what has happened and all that's been achieved. But as well, and I'm going to say there are opportunities that lie ahead of us. It is, I think, as Mayor Hazelhurst said, it's a bit of a blank slate moment in some respects for us. We can look at it as challenges and we can feel a little bit overwhelmed. There's a lot of uncertainty for each of us around the table, but it is a moment in which we can take stock and think about how we want to shape the future for the region. So quite a lot for us to think about. I know that you've got the presentations in here, and some of it's going to actually feel like a bit of a jolt back to the day-to-day stuff that happens. I'm not going to dwell too long on some of that information. We'll jump across them. The main thing is to take a little bit more time on that latter part, although I think some of the workshop sessions probably answered a few of the questions. And then happy to take questions from you all and feedback and comment as always. Where'd my big cursor go? So we'll move straight into bitumen supply chain. I know that some of the councils and your general managers have taken quite a bit of interest in this. You may be aware that since the Marsden facility closed down, the supply chain has largely been managed by Z Energy. They've opted out of the market middle of this year. We've completed a full review of supply, given that I think it's over 90% of all bitumen is used by Waka Kotahi and local government. It is an essential and strategic commodity for all of us. We've had a lot of feedback from key suppliers, from industry, from our partners. We've undertaken a full review of the current way in which the open market model will continue to provide for us. And we're really confident that once Z Energy does move out of the market, the current import model will provide both the quality but the continuity of supply that we need. We do just have to work through the pricing index of that. But that work is well underway and will be established prior to the change. Something that is really critical, and I know when I was here, I think it was only even a few weeks ago, you still see them on, unfortunately, the side of the roads and on property. The increase in the number of water-damaged vehicles. I should note these aren't only just personal vehicles, they're also like whole car yards as well of new vehicles too. And it does present quite an inherent safety risk and a liability for individuals and for businesses. And many of the questions that we have fielded is, once it's dry, can I use it again? No, essentially. It can still present a really grave safety risk. There's a link there if anybody wants more information or has got questions or their community does. We've got a full kind of detailed web page on how to manage this. But I think as well, just acknowledging the flow-on effect. There's going to be supply and demand issues when it comes to vehicles right across the country, and that's off of the back of existing supply issues caused by COVID. But also as well, just a buyer beware. You know, when you're at community meetings and things too, if these questions are coming up, just damaged vehicles being cleaned up and sold, making sure that members are doing their due diligence on those. And that, again, Waka Kotahi can help with. But it is a very real risk for our communities. Road Safety Week, that's coming up in a couple of weeks, the 15th to the 21st of May. We've got over 1,000 different organisations, a lot of schools this time round, childcare centres, community groups, signing up for the theme of being a road safety hero. I know that you've got a very active road safety programme right across the region. If there are opportunities to get involved or support your community, we would greatly appreciate that. Maybe a little bit more time on this one, given the previous workshop. Arataki, our 30-year plan, I think this is the second iteration of it. It's something to keep in mind as we continue to shape our medium to long, depending on your view of long-term view for the region. Arataki is the Aotearoa long-term view. Given that we're seeing, experiencing, but also wanting to lead quite significant changes in our transport system, and these will all affect the kind of form and function of the system right across the country. But for those of us in decision-making and in leadership roles, we've got to make sure that we've got a shared view of how we go about that planning, that development, that investment over the next 30 years. So once we've all opted out of that, what kind of legacy are we leaving others to build on? In the next 30 years, we're building up a strong evidence base to help support decision making. Also, as well, some of the conversations that we had around technology use in the transport system as well. How are we getting to thinking about that today for the outcomes we want into the future? And there's 5 main components. I don't know if anybody's had the chance to have a look at the online platform, but there's 5 main components of how Arataki's brought together. So you have the strategic context, the big long view for Aotearoa, informed by many different factors internationally and nationally on how we want the system to function. We have the national direction, so that's kind of the system view of the network. the regional direction, so your regional and local context, and your councils have fed into that. And also the, if you like, the network and mode view. So land transport isn't just the roading system, it's all other aspects, again, that we've spoken about. And then the different lenses, everything from Te Ao Māori to a freight and equity perspective. We'll continue to evolve this and continue to work with your councils on this and from a regional perspective to make sure we've got that regional context and direction correct. But it's something to think about for the recovery group as well and for your longer term plans. Speed management planning. You'll be aware that the government has made some announcements around speed management planning, particularly in relation to the state highway network. You'll also, as well, your councils, you'll have received a letter from the Director of Land Transport too, just around the deadlines for the full speed management plans that we're all developing. And some of that's to provide both clarity, but also as well an acknowledgement that everybody's got a lot on, especially in impacted regions. And we are keen to work with you to make sure that you can still comply with what's required, but as well that we are pragmatic about how those deadlines interact with everything else that you're doing at the moment. VKT reduction, and this is something as well that there's been some recent announcements on. So I've just got some information in here just for real clarity. But I think probably the overarching thing is when we're thinking about long-term, we're thinking about the regional land transport plan, this type of thinking is still really important. However it moves forward, whether it's changes in government policy statements, the kind of thinking about how we want our people in our place to function is critical. And part of that is reducing our overall emissions and reducing the vehicles kilometre travel where appropriate. The announcements, though, indicated, and we'll just be really clear on this, that we will be focusing on the Tier 1, the large metros, through 2023, not Tier 1 and Tier 2 straight off the bat, again, to provide a little bit more room for manoeuvring, but also as well, I think it's about 85% of the emissions come from those Tier 1s anyway, so we'll deal with them first. I think that one's probably covered too. Just lastly as well, in surrounding the announcements, and I think the Minister's been quite clear on this, there was some concern that if we were only looking at Tier 1 for vehicle VKT reductions, the majority or all of the funding for public transport or mode shift would flow to the metros. That's not correct, and the Minister has been quite clear on that. So please don't think that you should shift your plans, your regional public transport plans away for that you're not likely to get funding. The Minister has been very, very clear that reducing overall emissions, this is part and parcel of how we need to do that as a country. So the support for public transport is for right across the country, not just the Tier 1s. Moving back to kind of normal business for the RTC, we've got the update on our RLTP significant activities, which even in the context of what we're all working through, the majority are still progressing pretty well. Obviously, aside on projects like bridge strengthening, they'll be having a different framing now going forwards, but by and large progressing well. An update on the renewals programme, mainly just to say for the region, we have extended the renewals, the construction season for Hawke's Bay to ensure that we get as much as we can done in the time that we have available. So we have extended it because generally you get good weather over here through to the end of May, which will just allow us to continue with some further rehab and resale sites. But there's no way to escape it, and I wouldn't try. It has been significantly impacted since the second week of February. It's taken a huge chunk of our maintenance construction season away from us. Speed and infrastructure, this has largely not changed from the last RTC, other to acknowledge that we are underway on the State Highway 51 Napier to Hastings safety improvement projects, the side barriers, medium barriers, and the first stage of the roundabout. I think that's about to kick off on the 13th of this month, I believe. And we'll cover off some of the 2 State Highway 5s in the programme business case that Deputy Mayor Kerr referenced. We do have the work underway on the short-term safety improvement projects for State Highway 5, the quicker wins, if you like, that we can begin to get underway. Just for confirmation as well, though, that I think, as we had discussed at one of the State Highway 5 reference group meetings, this money is for the safety improvement project. There was a little bit of confusion or concern that that would be what the money was available for the whole of the State Highway 5. That's just for safety improvements. So resilience, etc., everything else would be in addition to that.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't have a copy of these slides. Is this something that we should have had a copy of? And I'm just wondering, is it just me or did any of my other, we got some slides,
It's
but
not what's in there.
No, you have the detailed pack, I believe. Do you have the detailed ones? Yeah,
yeah.
Project-specific ones.
yeah.
Can we please make sure we do have a copy of these sent through to us?
Okay, yep.
Thank you. And in future that we get them?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, just a glitch this time, no doubt. Thank you.
State Highway 5, the programme business case. I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, but just to reiterate, it was nicely summarised, Deputy Mayor Kerr, as the quantum of work that is happening in the region. The programme business case is progressing well now that it's been sort of re-stood up post the cyclone. I think we've had 4, possibly 5 investment logic workshops and community and stakeholder meetings. We have stood up the reference group and the steering group, and we've also identified some of those, as I mentioned, the short-term safety improvements that we can kick off. Works due to start in June 2023 and be finished hopefully by March 2024. I think the benefits of some of this, if there are some, is there's a lot of work when you've driven State Highway 5 recently happening anyway. We can minimise overall long-term disruption to road users when we combine with the current work that's going on to bring that road back to a reasonable level of service at the moment.
So, sorry, question if I may?
Yep.
So just to clarify, Linda, what you're saying that although there's work on the corridor that is rebuilding after cyclone damage, there's also investment and maintenance happening that's not necessarily cyclone damage?
Yes, there will be. So the short term, the response and initial rebuild work will be happening, but there's other safety work that can be done in tandem with that as well. And then the maintenance, too. So there's a few work streams for State Highway 5. And then the resilience work will be the longer term.
Thank you.
And the programme business case, so just to dig in a little bit deeper to that, we've had the timeline shared previously for State Highway 5 for the business case. Just want to as well touch on the evaluation of the impact of the speed reduction too. That report has been handled externally by Ernst & Young. We have seen a draft that's come to the Road to Zero Executive Subcommittee. There's a little bit of further work to be done, and then it will be brought back to councils and this committee. So it's not far away at all. That was the evaluation of the kind of social and economic impacts of the speed reduction.
Councillor Price.
Just a question while you're on the Taupo Road.
Yes.
Do your records show that that it operates at a normal sort of speed now? Because we're getting feedback that a lot of, and we're pushing that we're open, that people in Auckland are thinking, oh, why go through there because the road's such a shambles. Do you have anything on your websites sort of saying it's pretty well back to normal?
No, it definitely doesn't say it's pretty well back to normal. It's still highlighted on our journey planner that it's there, but with restrictions, because there are sections that are still at reduced speeds, but also sections that are still one lane. We have reports that I guess it would be an off-peak that the additional journey time could be 30 minutes to 45 minutes longer at peak time, and depending on what else, it can be over an hour longer to an hour and a half, depending on the traffic that's on it. But our website makes that quite clear, that it's by no means the road that you used to travel on.
So we talk to people that say they come across at a bit similar times to what they used to.
Well, I'm going to make a estimate that perhaps they're not at a safe and appropriate speed or adhering to the reduced speeds for their safety and the road workers. It's not my experience of that road.
So we do monitor that anyway, because it has quite an effect on our tourism here.
Monitor it in what sense?
So that if there is modifications, it is updated quite quickly on your website?
Yes, we would. I think the primary thing, though, is that we've got to make sure that, one, the road is safe for road users and that the right interventions are there. We're going to not make any apologies if we are, if there is a significant underslip, that you will have to go at 30 or 50k around that. Once that's removed and it's the remedial action's been taken, Journey Planner is immediately updated, so it is real time. But no, people, I can't imagine who is managing to drive that road at the previous. I don't. Yeah.
There are anonymous people that
Okay.
I'll be watching you.
I think what Councillor Price is indicating is that we need to be realistic about the information that we give those who may want to visit Hawke's Bay.
Absolutely.
And there is a need for people to come and visit Hawke's Bay. Absolutely. So, for instance, instead of actually saying there could be up to an hour delay, I would say you can easily calculate if you go at 30k through these particular periods, areas, then the road, the travel that road would be, for instance, an extra 20 minutes. That's what you then would advise. That's how I would see it, Be practical about it, pragmatic about it, rather than actually the worst case scenario.
We don't say times. I can advise that straight away.
Okay.
We provide you with the information that helps you make a realistic appraisal of where you need to get to, knowing that the road has been impacted by one of the most significant storms that's hit the country in quite some time. And that there are a number of areas with restrictions on it. Clearly, if you were to drive it and Councillor Price's person were to drive it, you might get there at different times. I'm not going to hazard a guess on that.
Maybe Councillor Price should actually write you an email with the suggested wording. Okay. Carry on, please.
I don't think it'll get put across.
I think we'll use it. So by the 31st of May, we should have workshop number 5 for the programme business case. The shortlist will be emerging by that stage for the preferred programme of work. That's in partnership with our partners, key stakeholders, community representatives. That will then help feed into what then goes forward for funding from that stage on. The strategic response plans. Just a couple of points really to underscore. I think many of you will be well across this, and Sarah covered it excellently, given that Sarah's leading this work earlier on. It is specific to the state highway network, but because it is a strategic response and resilience plan, it does consider the strategic role of your local roads. I don't think any of us have ever felt it, in such a compounding way, the importance of the local roads and the state highway network working together, especially to get produce, stock and people out And we have to consider it while this work is specifically state highway in that broader context. In saying that, it does not seek to direct or inform your local road investment. I don't think there's anything more on that. It sounds like we've got a lot of questions coming. Go for it.
If some of this funding for the strategic response will not be part of the RLTP and the NL whatever fund, is there a time frame that we need to get this report complete to the board, for the board to request additional funding from the Crown before it moves too close to when the election is? And are we on track to be able to ask the Crown for funding if we were to?
In short, I would say yes to that. So Sarah's leading a really compressed timeframe, which she outlined earlier. And that is primarily one, to make sure that we make good progress for your communities, but also as well that we hit some of these milestones to make sure that post the budget into the next RLTP development, that we have the information that's needed to support further funding bids or staircasing programmes of work, be it through the RLTP or other funding pots. We have a budget bid in at the moment. Can't say it budget secrecy. We should be able to provide you with some clarity on funding for continued response work very shortly, I hope. But we are still waiting. We're in as much of the dark as you are for what happens for the longer term rebuild work.
And through you, Mr. Chair, just a subsequent question. As this work gets completed, can we have back to our districts the most up-to-date information so we too can put it in our locality plans, although it will be a NZTA project, to note that this is of high importance for our community and their recovery?
I want to say yes.
Yes, so for example, I've got Craig sitting on my group in terms of leadership from Hastings.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Linda. Can you just, you might not be able to answer this, but the $250 million that was set aside by the Crown for the impacted regions, to how much of that money has been allocated? And I think it's finishing in June, end of June.
From the bids that we have in for both ourselves and for local government, overall I think it's actually just over the 250 million, which is fine. And I think at this stage the actual parts that have been claimed, I think it's sitting currently at about 60% of it. So we've still got a bit of work to do to get that money out the door by the end of June.
Yeah.
Yes. But it is subscribed, let's say. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Just a subsequent response to that, and just acknowledging some of the comments earlier. The 30th of June is a hard cut-off. It's required by the Minister. It's required by us for our own audit purposes. We are working with individual councils that are expressing concern about the constraints that places them under. It places us under a huge amount of constraint as well. But hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some greater certainty, not in the long term, but greater certainty very shortly on what happens post 30th of June, because I know that it's really difficult.
Thank you.
Just one last one, and I just want to make this kind of really clear, is the rebuild delivery model or the alliance model. And I think probably it's clearer after you've heard from Sarah today as well, but there's been much talk about the alliance model. I know when Nicole and Brett met with the mayors, it would have been back early March, it was first discussed. And then 2 weeks after that, Brett and the regional managers met with your general managers to get feedback on the alliance model. So there's been quite a bit of discussion with our partners prior to us signing an interim agreement on the alliance model. What I would say here as well is that, I'm just going to speak in layman's terms, this is to support the build. It's not to do the planning. Sarah and her team have that expertise along with your teams. This is the building of the stuff. There is a little bit of planning, like these guys get to plan how you respond to the slips or the underslips and culverts and do some design for that, but they don't have the strategic view of what needs to happen on a network. They're here to deliver what's agreed. Also as well, it's an interim. It's not fully signed and set up till post-June. But just to really kind of be clear on what that looks like, initially they'll be doing some of the culvert repairs. They might be doing some remediation on some bridges. They'll be doing some further slip works. There's a good sort of 9-month lag here of the work that needs to happen alongside the planning before they get into, say, rebuilding completely State Highway 5 or 2. So it's not a get in and soak it all up and do it from, 1 July. The other side of things is we've been really, really careful, and we've been given some really clear direction by our ministers and the recovery ministers that this provides a huge opportunity to build the capacity and capability of local contractors. This shouldn't just be about the very largest businesses across the country. There's a requirement for them to utilise local contractors, but also as well ensure that we have progressive procurement opportunities for Māori, for Pacifica, for other parts of our community to develop and train the skills that we need here. In saying that, it's not just state highways that are impacted, it's local roads. It's other things, it's Three Waters. So this is why we've begun the discussions with these contractors a month ago, because they need to begin to plan how they sequence this, how they resource it, knowing that they have teams over unimpacted areas, but that they have other contracts to fulfill. And there are some specific requirements about how much of their work can be allocated to Waka Kotahi's work. So they can't just say we're only going to do 100% Waka Kotahi stuff, essentially. So I think, I know that there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of information that's floating around. If anybody has specific detailed questions, I'm happy to answer them outside the meeting. But I know too that we've got a session coming up shortly, I think, with the Alliance that now has its board set up in region, with our regional managers. They'll be beginning to engage more closely with you and your councils to help begin to sequence what some of this work looks like. I would just say that we don't have all of the answers. You know what that feels like. I'm quite sure we're trying to stand this up as we go and respond as we go. But I hope that that gives you a little bit more insight to some of the concerns, not all, about the challenges that lie ahead. That's all from me, and happy to take more questions.
Thank you for that, and it was quite extensive, I must say. Have we got any questions from the floor?
Through you, Chair, just really, question and a comment, but first and foremost, Linda, can I acknowledge your good communication through the last 11 weeks? And it has been a lifeline for our community to be able to understand what is happening and for them to be able to connect. And so I'd like to acknowledge your communication to us all. And acknowledge the work of your local team, and they've been outstanding here and in our community meetings, which have been really tricky and hard for our community as they've been suffering through. So, as you know, we're very excited about meeting our friends from Wairoa at the Waikari Bridge, and to be able to give them a hug. We've still got Mayor Little up there, I see. And so I see in the release that you're 2 weeks early, is that right? Yes. Well, thank you for that. And we know that, Mayor Little has been, it's just been tragic for our Wairoa community, not being able to access the services that they normally use, that come down to the region for. So if there's going to be a blessing, is it next Saturday?
It is indeed Saturday, the 13th of May at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Well, Mayor Little, will we see you there next Saturday?
Well, it picked a really bad weekend for me because I'm down in Christchurch at my daughter's graduation.
No. Oh, no.
But Linda, as I've rang her probably daily, and then I hadn't rang her for a day or two, so she rang me and says, "Are you right? I haven't heard from you." But Linda, I'll talk on what Sandra's saying. Your communication is great. You keep us informed. You listen to us. We all get grumpy from time to time, but yeah, it's a hard job, and we're getting there. But we've got a lot ahead of us here. But Denise will be there if I can't be there. Deputy Miller. Maybe it could be a day for deputies.
Maybe what?
A day for deputies. Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think I step in front of my mayor on openings of bridges.
I was coming to give you a hug. Oh. When do you go on holiday? When do you go to Christchurch?
No, I go on Monday. So last time we went down for 2 days. Sorry, we're getting off piece here, but it was 2 days too quick, so we've taken a bit more time this time.
Okay, anyway.
Like I could almost have a little cry, actually. I'm gutted.
They're doing all this hard work for you, Mayor Little, and now you're not going to be there. Be talk of the town.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get a cutout or something.
So through you, Chair, I'm just thinking about this because this is so significant for both communities. And so, and in terms of a community celebration, I think that would be, if Waka Kotahi could enable that, bring all of our community together and have a bit of a celebration, perhaps after the blessing. I mean, I think perhaps we'll have an offline conversation. I think this is, Craig, when you're back, understanding that, and we could have our own celebration. I mean, it's wonderful that the community will be able to travel on the road next Sunday, the 14th. And perhaps we could look at that, where we both come. I mean, I know that the national media are waiting for this day too, so they will be at the blessing. They're very excited about that. That is the next big important temporary bridge opening here. So, all right, well, we'll have an offline conversation about that.
No, I think that's great. And like I say, I am saddened I'm not there. I was expecting it to be the end of May, as it's very unusual NZTA cut times off their work. But yeah, maybe we could open the Waikari pub like the old days and have a few and then drive home. That's a joke.
It's going to skip over that one.
Mayor Little, you realise now that horrible cheating council here on the Heritonga Plains are once again going to steal the show, and they're going to be on the front page of the national news, aren't they?
Mate, it happens all the time.
Yeah, okay. Good. Any other questions or comments for Linda? Martin hasn't got his hand up, so that's really good. It's really good.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Just a question really on the Fernhill Bridge, and understanding that design is underway, repair works to start in the next financial year, depending on cost. Could you give us a bit of an update on what that means?
Well, I'll need to come back to you directly on that. No worries.
And given that this is a significant bridge for us in our network, and just like to have some more information on what depending on cost means. Thank you.
Yep. I'll come back to you directly.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your item. We don't need to make any decisions on that. And then we go to the next item. And we're doing well for time, which is great, being a Friday afternoon. We go to item number 9, the Regional Transport Program, May 2023. Who will be leading that?
That will be in the chat. Great. So I will take the item as read. It's simply an update on the RTAG program of work, noting, of course, that the Resilience and Rebuild workstream is new and the tasks within that are TBC based on the outputs of, in part, the workshop that we had prior to this meeting and the outputs intent of the Regional Recovery Plan. So I'll just take any questions.
Are there any questions? No questions. Are there any comments?
Chair, just to check that we're dealing with item 8, not item 9 at the moment.
We're 8.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have a comment or a question? That's a vigorous no. Councillor Kerr.
Not on 8.
I would just like to acknowledge the improvements and positive changes that have come about with some information that have been coming to us recently. This program tracker is great. So whether that is through Bryce or through more senior staff, I just want to acknowledge that there has been an improvement and it's brilliant and it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Lovely to receive positive feedback.
When it's deserved,
Okay.
definitely.
Any other comments, questions? Okay.
Just one little point, it's a bit sad about Maiways coming to Napier, being delayed.
Okay. Did you hear that comment, Councillor Williams?
Yes, look, I did, and I had been minded to do 2 things on the previous item, Chair, if I could just give me an indulgence here. One was to just echo and endorse everything said about Linda and Waka Kotahi's heroic response to match the heroic response of our own communities and get our transport infrastructure back up and running as soon as possible. One of the casualties of all of this, amongst other factors, has been a realisation by the council that, in part due to the cyclone and the need to focus ratepayer spend on that from now, but in part due to indexation costs and escalating costs for the general public transport network, we're in a position now where we've only got about 500,000 left to roll out My Way in Napier. And I'm proposing that I take offline with Linda, something I've already touched on with her, is whether we can't, which basically means we can't progress the My Way trial in Napier this year at least. I'm not giving up on it, and maybe it's something we can do next year. But the only way we could do it this year would be if, perhaps in a recovery guise, there was a new funding pool available from Waka Kotahi to enable that trial to be progressed in Napier. I think we may be past that point in logistical terms. The success of the Hastings trial is discussed and the issues it raised in the next item of the agenda, or the public transport update. But I'm not giving up on it, but effectively our budget as a council is such that it's simply untenable as matters stand to do anything like the trial we had in mind for Napier. So that's great. That's very, very sad news indeed for me. But I will pursue discussions with Linda around a recovery lens through which we might resurrect this for the future, perhaps 2024. Thank you.
We may discuss that somewhat more in the next item. Okay. I've got some ideas on it as well, maybe questions to Martin. Okay.
Chair?
Yes.
One minor request, I'm not sure who to ask this of, but to have a glossary of all of the terms, because I've been involved in this committee for quite some years and I still get caught out with what are these ILMs, all of these acronyms.
JTs.
Yeah, and it would be good just to build up and have sitting in the back of our agendas. Be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Well, that comment makes a lot of other people around the table quite glad that they're not the only ones floundering when it comes to acronyms. But it makes a good point. Thank you. And at least in the presentation, if you use an acronym, explain it at the first use, and then after that, it should be, once again, a reminder. Anyway.
But more so often it's not just what the words are, but what a layman's description of.
Okay.
So an ILM might be investment logic mapping, but.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. On that note, I would like a move to receive and note the Regional Transport Program May 2023 update. Have we got a mover? Sandra? Councillor Price. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? The ayes have it. I also failed to do the same for item 7, that we receive and note the NZTA Regional Directors update. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Taylor, seconder. Councillor Price. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
No, ayes have it. Okay, then we move to item 9. Councillor Martin. RLTP investment and delivery update. Is that you once again?
That is me, Chair.
Great.
So I will take the item as read once again. RLTP is our Regional Land Transport Plan.
What does that
which
mean?
is
No.
that is fundamentally our funding vehicle and our land transport plan over a 10 to 20 year horizon that is reviewed on a 3-yearly basis and potentially refreshed on a 3-yearly basis. Currently, we are in the review cycle right now. However, it is of course worth noting that, as we are all aware, we have had a very significant weather event. So that review at the very least will be an incredibly fulsome one and possibly more. So I'll just open the floor for questions.
Are there any questions? If no questions, then we go straight to comments. And I know that Councillor Williams will, without raising his hand, will have a remark.
It may not be a remarkable remark, but it will be hopefully helpful. I've actually just been offline emailing Bryce and working on this over the lunch break to ensure that we were workshopping this morning for the benefit of those who weren't part of that workshop, this investment logic map, which really is the driver of decision making around different transport investment options and different funding bids for the most significant activities that we'll be putting into our next transport plan. So the weighting that we're giving to the first component of that map in the benefits column to do with resilience is really important. And the wording of it is really important, because if you're weighing one option up against another, and maybe let's take an example of a 2-lane versus a 4-lane expressway, and one with a cycle lane on it and one not, or you're looking at new transport corridors through to Wairoa, you'll be looking at it and evaluating the different options through that lens. So it's really important we get it right, and we had quite a substantive discussion around a definition of resilience and what that means at regional level this morning to ensure that we're capturing all of the essential elements of it. And so we also had a discussion, because this benefits section, or the first row of it at least, needs to, I think, align with and be consistent with the terminology we apply in our definition of resilience. And so I had tried to sort of think of all of the things that were said this morning, both as to that definition and both as to the first item on the map, under benefit. And I put to Bryce some suggested changes, which I'll just sort of take you through now. One was to increase the weighting of it to 60% and perhaps consequentially reduce the subsequent two items to 25 and 15. That's one possibility. We, in our definition, began with the wording, rather than a network that is prepared for, we adopted wording that says something like, and Bryce may be able to bring up the definition that we landed on this morning, a transport system that supports our communities to be prepared for future risk, and which is enhanced to support future growth. For KPI 3, I should say, we rather than just reliable travel times, reliable and efficient travel times. For KPI 10, we were talking about in the definition as to network alternatives that they must be effective. So I've suggested adding the word effective into that. I've also suggested to Bryce that we add a new KPI, and it's that a functioning transport route for people and communities be open, that there be a functioning transport route for people and communities at all times. That was the one that there's got to be at least one thing working as our benefit of resilience. So with all of that in mind, I'd proposed a number of different changes, and I wasn't quite, we had added reference to natural hazards somewhere, and I wasn't quite sure where it lived. It's quite difficult working online. And yeah, so that's me. That's what I wanted to say about it all. So I don't know if Bryce can bring that up as it would now appear, and we could take it from there. Because I think we have to adopt this today.
Through you, Chair, we're just working on getting the most current version up on the screen for everyone.
Okay. Hey, Martin, as a comment, as a deputy chair, I really appreciate the hard work that you do and the thoughts that you put into it. However, the process and the way you go about it, it becomes a one-man thought, and I've had this once before. It's very good, but we need to be able to actually get it clearly on the table so that everybody around the table actually can see what is happening in the thought process. Otherwise, it becomes you who actually makes the decision. It's very dangerous. You need to be very careful of that. And it's just a comment on.
I understand that, but what I have actually tried to do, rather than being a one-person thought, I've actually tried to marshal all of the different thoughts that were expressed in the room and capture them in one place. So it wasn't just me talking. I agree we need to have it in front of us so we know what I've just said.
Can I HDMI in?
Yeah, it is just everything it now.
Or can I plug in here? 'Cause it's on the...
They're working on it now, Martin. Yes, Councillor Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. As I heard you speak the changes, I thought you'd captured very succinctly the conversations that we've had and support them, and particularly like the new KPI, because that's what we're after, that there is a functioning route for our community to be able to use. So thank you. And we now have them in front of us.
Yes, through you, Chair. What we have in front of us, thank you, is the updated version based off the workshop discussion. The highlights are the additions.
That's perfect, Bryce. That's exactly what I was hoping that I had shared, and that's exactly what I had in mind when I shared it. So thank you. That was what I talked about.
Through you, Chair, one thing to note, pending approval from this committee in terms of the weightings, perhaps the TAG should go back and look at the best way to reallocate those percentages in terms of boosting that benefit up to 60%.
Support that direction. Through you, Chair, I support that direction. I'm happy with those, through you, Chair, I'm happy with those changes that were discussed this morning, and I think that captures the views of everyone, and I think they're really relevant and important changes. We did consider having a recommendation that would allow any further changes that as required. So I'm not sure if we need that now or not. But I'm comfortable with the direction of the changes. Happy to move.
We want to capture the tag, being able to modify, enhance the weightings, enhancing the weightings into benefit one.
Would you like that included or just as a side note?
It's a side note.
Okay. Just been discussed across the table, for those who are online, that the tag will look at the ratings, and will be given the freedom to alter if required.
This one. This one.
Councillor Taylor?
I was going to say, the recommendation as it stands is good with, I think the addition of the tag involvement in the percentages should be in the
rating.
recommendation.
Yeah, okay. Okay, we fully understand that. Do we need to accept this again officially, or are we happy with what we now have got in front of us?
Good move.
You move it?
Yes, I'm happy to.
Okay, you move. Have we got a second? Second? Okay. All in favour, say aye as it stands.
Aye.
Against? Yep, got thumbs up. Thank you. Okay. Anything else that you would like to bomb us with, Councillor Williams?
No, I'm just reflecting back here, Councillor.
Good.
I hope I was being helpful, and I'm really appreciating what you're doing there for the committee, Edith.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on item 9? So I've got a question, and it relates back to Councillor Price's comment or question. If the My Way was successful in Hastings, is there a particular need for having a similar pilot in Napier, or can we say due to constraints on budget that we can accept that it will be similarly successful, and therefore we can take that as read, so to speak, and move forward with My Way if it's an option. Take in consideration, of course, that we will have a change in our public transport strategy in the way we are going to run that in the future.
Through you, Chair. Is that a question for me or a question for Councillor Williams?
Councillor Williams is the My Way poster boy, but either can take that question.
Well, through you, Chair, I can begin to answer that.
Chair, I think we've got the My Way expert online.
Perfect.
Just come to life. Afternoon, everyone. Through you, Chair, just to let you know, obviously, the technical aspects in this probably would answer your question. Obviously, currently, Hastings is undergoing review, as is timed as part of the process for having the trial. If Hastings is deemed successful, it could be that the My Way doesn't need to be trialled in Napier, but can be incorporated into the next RLTP as part of the program we want to deliver. However, I think it's very reasonable to think that Napier and Hastings are quite different in their needs. So, it's very possible for us to put a on-demand style transport into the RLTP to be adopted as part of our transport program and get funding through the RLTF or NLTF, for that. And so there are multiple options. I can speak to those a little bit more in the public transport update. But effectively, yes, if we deem that Hastings is successful, subject to a few changes, obviously, that may be required to improve it, that it could be funding requested for that to just be delivered as part of our normal business as usual for 2024 onwards.
Great, thank you. And that's so not all is lost. Councillor Price.
Just a question, Katie. If your survey comes back and says it's not successful, what happens then?
Great question. Thanks, Councillor Price. Through you, Chair. I think the thing that we need to consider is what makes it successful or unsuccessful. And so it's not that necessarily the style of transport is unsuccessful, but it may be that the way it's been rolled out or the the measures around it. So it may be from that evaluation that we find that to make it successful, it needs to have a certain number of vehicles per operating hour or something like that. Or it might be that it needs to have, the capacity to take X many people. So it's just that it might not be completely successful as it is, and that it needs to be expanded or condensed into a certain area. So I think that's what the findings will tell us, and I can speak to that further. But that specifically, it's not that it's black and white. There will definitely be grey aspects to that review.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. And this will save me raising this during public transport, but it's on the table now. The trial we did in Hastings was to replace routes. And that was an ambitious thing to do. That was Waka Kotahi's preference, that if we're going to trial it, we trial it. But there would be, I think, a possibility to do a different type of trial in Napier where it's a supplement to the existing routes. And that may not need as many vans, just one or two, but it sort of rotates and surfaces along the top. And I say that because, to answer your question, Councillor Van Bay, the new public transport plan is one that's frequency over coverage. And we got a very strong voice from our, less abled communities that they only supported frequency over coverage on the understanding that something like My Way would be there as an adjunct to it. So for people who can't walk to the more frequent bus routes, which are now further away, they'd have another option to connect them with it. So this is why I'm talking about maybe doing something different in Napier in 2024 once we've maybe got the funding situation back under control, is looking at a trial as an adjunct to existing routes or not being so ambitious in replacing existing routes to prove the concept for the regional transport plan, the new regional transport plan that will really kick off in 2025. Or we could just do it in 2025, as you suggest, Councillor Van Beek, and know that it might. So it's a very pertinent and live question. And that's what I think we need to turn our attention and thinking to now, in addition to everything that Katie shared.
Okay, great. Okay, do we have any other comments, questions? Councillor Kerr.
Just once again on the same topic, when the trial was set up, did we not have parameters around what success looked like back then? And so when the time comes to review, I'd like to be able to see what those measures are. Doesn't need to be discussed today, but we should look back. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair, yes, that we do have very strong parameters that are more than just the statistics of the patronage. So when we have completed the review, we can present that in full.
Okay.
Chairman,
Yes.
is this the time to ask that question about that government input?
Yes, you can.
Okay, all right. As we know, over the past year at least, there's been said about the government's contribution of 61 million to go to our respective regional councils to help them with driver wages and all that stuff. So where does our regional councils stand at this moment?
I think that's it's going to we're going, as you do in a game show, we're going to the wall now. So we're going to ask either Katie or Martin for that. Did you get that question, Katie?
Through you, Chair.
I didn't get. Oh, I was going to say I didn't get the question. Sorry, I've just completely lost connection, but I've come back in.
So can you
read? Then I do understand the question. I'd like to repeat.
Unfortunately, you're a little bit in and out and you seem to freeze, so I'm not sure whether we've got a right connection with you right now. What you could do is maybe turn your video off and then maybe a bit more stable, and then you can hear the entirety of the question.
Okay.
Good idea.
Over the past year, the government has indicated that they have 61 million to be allocated to regional councils throughout New Zealand to help those councils with the salary wages of bus drivers, driver retention and all that stuff. So where does this council stand? Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Abby. Just through you, Chair, this specifically, this funding through the SURF funding, which is Climate Emergency Response Funding, requires councils to meet the agency in the middle. So this is done at a funding assistance rate of 51%, 49% from the regional councils. And as we are inside a current funding cycle, it requires us to have had contingency or extra funding to be able to meet Waka Kotahi in the middle. So if we were to increase the driver wages, we would need to have half the amount for that to activate some of the 61 million to come to us. So of course, that is not the case for us. We don't have the extra budget in this funding cycle, and we've indicated that to the operator we work with, as well as Waka Kotahi. They are very aware of that and the process, and that we intend to build that into our requests for the next, which is from mid-2024.
That answers your question, but not satisfactory to you, I can imagine.
Funding on our behalf, yeah.
Could I add to that, in terms of the council's, I guess, political ambition, there hasn't been a formal resolution around this. From my perspective, I fully support the move to a livable wage towards that through the additional contributions. That we're only ever going to make public transport work if we're going to attract bus drivers to arm the fleet. And that's been the big problem we've had for the last 2 or 3 years with all the cancellations, which is an absolute disaster for public transport. We can't get enough drivers. Why can't we get enough drivers? Well, it's not worth the grief. And so, you know, if we're really going to be serious about this, we do need to back it. The problem with the government, $61 million, it was only half a promise. Because that might help with the Waka Kotahi contribution, but it leaves all of the councils that are locked into annual plans and long-term plans within very tight constraints of overall funding and facing massive rate increases in an embarrassing position. So that's the context in which that lands. We're in principle in support, but what do we do with it when we're already putting up rates significantly? Because we pay half, and Kotahi pays half, and then they need to get the funding for that from the government. So as I say, it was kind of only half a promise. But the other issue is that in the midst of all of that, we've got a contract, and it's actually GoBus that pays the living wage, and you end up in a little bit of a vicious circle, or some sort of a circle of at least 3 moving parts to try and actually get there. So support in principle. But it's not something we can just turn on a dime to implement.
I suppose that's at our detriment, because in the long run, if we do not have adequate drivers, extra drivers, we will never have a reliable transport service, public transport service. We're never going to have it. I've heard through the grapevine that they're just dreading opening up the number 12 route to Napier and back to Hastings, you know, because there's a lack of drivers. The drivers are not lining up for this job, being bus drivers. So we will not have a reliable service in the future, and so that's going to be sad for Hawke's Bay, for Hastings and Napier anyway.
Absolutely, and it does require investment, and hopefully in our long-term planning we will factor that in going forward. There's no 2 ways about it. And only can drive, as Councillor Williams said, it only will succeed if we actually have a reliable driver pool to go forward. Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to speed things up a little bit, being Friday afternoon, that we accept by common consent this item 9, and everybody agrees with that, I hope. Then we go to item number 10, regional safety update.
That will be me again, Chair.
Thank you.
So I will again take the item as read, as an update, and just take any questions or comments. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Number 23.1, where it talks about Ignite, the community driver mentor model. I'm just double checking that you're aware that Central Hawke's Bay has one of these programs that has been operating for some years. So just wanting to make you aware of that in case it had flown under the radar, Connecting Youth Employment.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we are aware of that, and that is something that as part of a previous driver licence funding pool was funded. I guess the key difference with Ignite is that it is part of a youth employment scheme. So the driver licensing, while it's a critical element of it, it's part of a wider wraparound service that looks to break down barriers and create habits and effectively get youth into employment, or at least create the option and the opportunity for it. So this pilot that they're doing is a 12-month pilot, and it's embedded within that wider program. So it's a slightly different approach in some respects.
With respect, given the one in CHB is called Connecting Youth Employment, it's, but thank you. And just as long as you're aware of it, and perhaps there could be communication with them to help the pilot that's happening with Ignite.
Learnings.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other question, if I may, Mr. Chair, was number 11, the rebrand and the campaigns that go alongside that. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be available for the next RTC meeting, and so I've already deleted it from my calendar. So I'm not sure how long the timeframes are for this to come back to us. But is there a timeline on that rebrand? When has it got to be signed off and happen?
Through you, Chair, and please do correct me if I'm wrong in my statement, but it's my understanding that as the governing body, the RTC needs to be made aware or kept abreast of things, but does not necessarily need to sign off on what is essentially an operational matter. However, there is significant value in making sure that one or two RTC members are at least across the final creative direction, the final visual identity, the final campaigns, and the overall plan. The intent from the RoadSafe Hawke's Bay perspective is to accelerate that as fast as we can. There is a real need to keep that moving. Some of the draft campaigns and creative approaches that we have had developed to date are fantastic, very impactful. They really bring that I, we, all of us strategy to life. And, particularly in the current environment where we find ourselves in, significant congestion, increased travel times, a lot of frustration, there is a need to move that along. Ideally, we would like to relaunch the brand early spring, if not before. There is a lot of work to do before that, but if we know that we can carry on and make that happen, whilst creating that visibility for the RTC, then that would be much appreciated.
With the meeting's approval, I'd like to suggest I might be willing and eligible to help with that, but also the chair obviously would, the normal chair of the committee would be an appropriate person, but I'm just aware that I am away in early spring. So just I'm not sure how it could be arranged that, two members of the RTC help with that process rather than waiting till the RTC meeting.
Through you, Chair, if I may make a suggestion on that. As with the RTAG workstreams, there is of course a RoadSafe one. The scope and the terms of reference of that are slightly different to the other RTAGs in that it's more of a steering committee. So I could possibly suggest that may be the best forum through which to do that. if that's suitable.
Support that. Yep.
Are you able to make that connection? So that at least you're diarised and you know exactly when
Yeah, love to
you
help.
know, it's happening, you get, you're able to cast your eye over whatever is being developed. And Councillor Williams may feel exactly similar. We never would stop anyone who wants to actually take on a job voluntary. Go to it, you know. Obviously, you're well motivated and the best person to do it. So we really appreciate you putting your hand up. It's not often that people put their hand up. Councillor Williams?
Totally endorse that, and if you need me to, come and support, just let me know. But I'm very, very grateful to you for taking that on.
And if you need any extra input regarding safety of active transport undertakes, you know where to come. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Then I'll move once again by common consent to accept this report. We'll go to item number 10, public transport update. Actually, we already have had quite a discussion around that.
Thank you. I can speak to this. Yes, and I'll leave my camera on, just off, sorry, to avoid me cutting out, but you know that I am here. Look, just rather than saying, I'll take the item as read, I will just speak to a couple of things given the interest. Look, clearly the cyclone recovery is ongoing, and just to make things quite clear that there is both the issue with infrastructure and the bridges, for example, that don't allow our routes to follow their normal pathway, but additionally we obviously also have the congestion issues, but on top of that we also have staff shortages. So while we could reinstate a Route 12, for example, it would require us to potentially take driver resources from other services, but additionally we can't provide a reliable timetable, which is a considerable part of patronage use. As we know, the reliability of a service goes a long way to people's usage of it. So there are a number of reasons why it continues to operate the way it does, and of course we are working with our operator consistently to ensure that we are doing as much as we can at any time, and we continue to evaluate the ability to change. So just to speak to that, of course. And then further to that, with the on-demand, the interest in My Way, that is being reviewed at the moment. And of course, that is against a whole range of measures, not just the patronage, which if you did measure it on only patronage, it would say, yes, it's very successful. But of course, that is not the total picture, which I have discussed in the past. It's, of course, the digital inequity and ability to use the platform, which is largely operated off an app, and of course the ability to sustain the call centre aspect of it for those that can't use the app, and then additionally the demand issues, and of course it is heavily relied on at peak times, and with only 3 vans, which is what was scoped, it is very difficult for us to offer the full capacity. So there are a range of issues and measures, and that's what we will be measuring against. So that will be quite an interesting picture. It also helps us build off next potential trial, or whether we have this as business as usual and how we would deliver that. So by us reviewing this and saying that the service is not successful as it is, doesn't mean that it will never be successful. It just means that we'd either need to change something, and as Councillor Williams alluded to, potentially supplementary rather than complementary rather than supplementary, which could look very different. So I think for us, it's just a matter of how has it been trialled, and is it successful the way it has been trialled, rather than is it a successful yes or no. So I can hopefully take the rest of the paper as read, and very happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, the floor is open. Any questions? Any comments? Okay, obviously you've done this all out of a job, Katie.
Too tired to take up the mental.
Yeah, once again, it's the Friday afternoon syndrome being raised by Councillor Kerr.
Yeah.
Chair, I just had a couple of quick comments after, but whenever suits.
Please do.
Just to thank Katie for the report and the enormous amount of work that's been done to keep public transport in any guise up and running through the driver shortages, all the issues RP's raised, that we need to carry forward and not lose sight of, the disruptions with the cyclone. Our communities have been enormously patient right through COVID, and now this. It is getting frustrating to the point, I think some people are considering whether public transport's for them, and that's really, I guess, sad and disheartening for us who are such enthusiasts for public transport. We will get there though, so we will get to a 2025 program that is a step change, and we need to bear that in mind. The other thing I just wanted to endorse the really good news and the fantastic proposals around the 10 bus stops at paragraph 18. That's just, brilliant to see that these bus stops would be linked in with active transports, with bike and scooter parking and e-charges and real-time information. I just had a question about the engagement plan at paragraph 19. Who is the engagement with about the specific design attributes of these bus stops?
Yes, so speaking to that, the engagement plan is at multiple levels. So there is an aspect of, obviously, we would be engaging with territorial authorities or road controlling authorities, because of course we are, not necessarily responsible for the infrastructure of our public transport network. So there's a little bit of crossover there, but more specifically depending on the area, it is best for us to engage directly with the communities and their community plans, which is a structure that Hastings District Council has, but also through the community for Napier, and that's more just for buy-in on design of the bus shelters. The reason being, the advice for that is that the more involvement that the community has on the design of the shelter, the more likely they are to own it and look after it, which is something that we really want, because this will be more significant than just a glass and steel frame shelter. So we want them to last a long time. But that is all being worked on in the comms and engagement plan that is being developed at present.
Thank you very much, and that is a good point. And definitely, public transport only will be successful if it's frequent, but most of all reliable, which is actually very important, because we all who sit here around the table, have got our keys in our pocket or on the table. We can pick that up and go, whereas people who use public transport cannot do that. And that's why I think it's very important on point 18 that you actually have included other forms of transport, like, for instance, active transport, and that you actually can park bikes safely. The problem with it is, and I've seen that overseas, is that you can make it too comfortable, and all of a sudden you have the wrong people hanging out, and it once again will be a barrier for those who actually who maybe feel somewhat vulnerable. Lighting is very important. It needs to be safe, but I think it also needs to be the way it looks is actually very important too. Just because it's a place on a route, it also actually need to be a pleasant place to be, so that people will use it. These ideas all need to be worked in, which is actually very important. So I commend you on the planning for the future, which is really important, and that from Kotai is part of that as well. So thank you very much for that. Sorry for rambling on, telling other people off for rambling on, and rambling on myself. Okay. Other questions, comments?
Through you, Chair, I just wonder if we might be able to have an update to Hastings District councillors on how the operation has been going with My Way, and just some feedback.
Okay, please do.
Yes. So an update, as you can see in the numbers provided in the report. As a rule, the patronage is still tracking well, but as you can see, it is it's subject to driver availability and vehicle availability, which makes it very vulnerable. So there was a period of time where there was only 2 drivers available. The operator couldn't provide a third, which made the capacity significantly drop, put a lot of pressure on peak times as well. And likewise, if there is a vehicle issue, that makes it significantly problematic as well. So I think what we've worked out and will be very apparent as the review puts in formally, that it is quite a vulnerable service. It requires specific training for drivers. It requires very specific vehicles, and the technology is a big factor. So we've seen consistent issues with people using the service at commuter time. Ideally, a fourth van would make a significant difference, but of course that's not how the service was scoped, which was not how it's been budgeted for either. So these are all things that would come out of the review. So our major concerns, obviously it's a great mode of transport for a lot of people. The best feedback we get are from those less abled and the older community as well. It's given them a significant increase in their independence, which is something we're very aware of. But certain communities struggle to access it due to the technology issues and significantly impacted by our call centre capacity that we were very aware of during the cyclone as well. So when there's long waits for getting through to someone to book a ride, that impacts people's journey times as well. So it's a very, very human dependent service. Whereas a fixed route service, while is not going to take you exactly where you want to go and not as flexibly time wise, you can just get on and off without much human intervention. And so these are just significant things for us to consider in terms of the difference between a fixed route service and an on-demand service. They both have different kinds of benefits for different people. So as a whole, we get great feedback, but when it's vulnerable or where there are issues, it does impact a lot of people, especially making connections to other services or trying to get somewhere at a very specific time. But as you can see in the report, the numbers are still very good, and the grey against the green depicts what rides can't be offered. So we're up in sort of the average 95% ride delivery. So that is a really good statistic, it's sort of on an international scale.
Okay. Happy with that? No further questions on that? Okay. Of course, if you've got a 3-van fleet and one goes out, straight away 33% of your capacity is gone. You can imagine that. Just a quick question before I wrap it up. Have you identified, is there a number of people that use MyWay and they're returnees, or do you still have new people coming and going as patrons?
It's a good question. We actually have both, but we have a really high number of returnees. The average is about 500, which is really, really good. It's impossible for us to tell that prior with the fixed route services, because some people use the service every week on a Wednesday, but someone else might never use it on a Wednesday, so they appear to be almost the same person. But we can see that we're getting growing app downloads, so it is still increasing. But some people may have started to use it less due to sort of the impact of Cyclone Gabrielle or the fact that they can't connect to another service that they would have previously used. So it's a huge number of returning riders and still a growing number of app downloads, but not as much as we did have to begin with, because of course it was a big uptake in the early stages.
Great, thank you, much appreciated. Okay, on that note, you like to move it, Martin?
Move the report be received, yes, thank you, Chair.
Seconder. Councillor, it's the mayor from Hastings, so they don't double up. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, then we go to, can I make a suggestion that we actually move on and don't stop for a cup of tea, and we carry on with the items? I think they'll be relatively quick, we hope. So on that note, we'll make that decision, and I'll ask Daniel, got it written down, Edifin from Kiwi Rail to come and give us a presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the absence of Angus Hodgson, who normally is here.
Through Mr. Chair, I do need to leave for another meeting, so thank you everybody, and
I will formally become the
Okay,
delegate.
at least I don't have to keep an eye on you two anymore.
No, that's what you don't need to. No. Thanks everyone for your hard work.
Apologies,
have a
just
good
before
weekend.
Mayor
Thank you.
Hazelhurst goes, I do have an update for you on Fernhill. Good news. We didn't have funding for it, but because we now don't have some other bridges elsewhere, other funding has become available. It's currently design is underway as a rough estimate, We should be tendering for, in August, September time, repair likely to start before the end of this year for the bridge.
Thank you very much, Linda. That's wonderful news.
No worries.
And is that to return it to class 1,
Yes, back to what it was.
HPMV?
At a new place?
Now you're pushing it.
Somewhere else?
Higher and wider.
Business case.
Thank goodness it's got a cycle lane. Thank
Okay,
you.
excellent, thank you, that's really great.
See you.
That's very efficient.
See you Monday.
Or you let me know when
Daniel, the floor is yours. Maybe also could you introduce yourself, who you are, so that we know at least that you're not just somebody from the street, with a presentation.
Kia ora, I'm Daniel Hedefin, work for Kirau. I'm the Program Director for the Hawke's Bay Cyclone Recovery, and one of our exec was Dave Gordon is joining us online. So Dave's the Kirau Executive Member responsible for our national recovery from Cyclone Gabriel. We've obviously been hit in Northland, Auckland, across the east coast by Cyclone Gabriel. I'm actually from Hawke's Bay. I don't live here at the moment, but I'm living with family while I'm up for the recovery, and based out at Ahuriri in our Napier depot. So presentation I'm going to take you through is what some of our damage is, and some of what we're doing about it, and then I guess taking questions. And I think 20 minutes was what I saw. Do you want me to be faster, slower? 20 minutes or 15?
Faster is good. Like your network.
Friday afternoon.
Cool, Friday afternoon, yep. All right, I'll get through these pretty quick. So we call it the Palmerston North Gisborne line. We're pretty simple people, so 0 kilometres is Palmerston North, and 390 kilometres is at Gisborne, and everywhere in between is a linear length. And so you'll see that I refer to things by the kilometrage, and hopefully sometimes by place names. We're splitting it into four areas for the cyclone recovery. South of Hastings, Hastings to Napier, Napier to Wairau, and then Wairau to Gisborne. And I'll go through that in a bit more detail here. So Hastings South, we have a slightly different setup from Waka Kotahi, who we often get compared with, and how we manage our network. And so Waka Kotahi have network outcome contractors, NOCs. Kirau actually self-performs that work ourselves. So we have a workforce of about 1,000 Kirau workers that do all the infrastructure work. Might be a bit more than that actually. And we've got about 50 staff based in Ahuriri who both run trains and do the infrastructure work too. And some crews in Dannevirke, some crews in Palmerston North. So for Hastings South, our Lower North Island Networks team, they managed getting the track open, and yeah, so that I'll actually go into that in just a bit. Hastings to Napier, that's managed by a team I'm part of, what we call our construction delivery projects team, and we're working on getting that open with a project group, and I've said further thinking on full delivery process because, as per the previous presentation, we're part of the alliance with Waka Kotahi, Higgins, Fulton Hogan and Downers, similar to what we were in Kaikoura after the Kaikoura earthquake in 2016. Napier to Wairau, that's about 116 kilometres of track, and again that's one my team is working on and doing the thinking at the moment. And then Wairau to Gisborne, this is probably quite relevant. That's mothballed, and there's not an intent to open that. So that's been mothballed since about 2012. I was actually the area manager at that time for this section of track, so I was living here. But we still have a duty of care because we own the land, and what that means is making sure that we don't detrimentally affect other landowners, and the same for them to our land. So I'm going to go into the sections, the 3 sections up to Wairau in a bit more detail, and specifically I'm going to cover some more detail around the Hastings to Napier because there's a lot more interest in that, it being quite visible, and obviously Napier being a key destination for us. So we didn't have damage the whole length. Pretty much we did have some through the Manawatu Gorge, but generally it was between Woodville to Hastings, and actually really between Dannevirke to Hastings. So we've opened that line as of the start of April, and we did have one what we call a major damage site, and I'll come into the distinctions in just a bit, and that was at the Waipawa, so just on the north side of the Waipawa River, just between the BP and the river. So that's open, and there's a picture of the team doing that work. We still have damage sites between Hastings and Dannevirke, well actually between Hastings and the Manawatu Gorge, but they're much smaller scale work than what we've got north of Hastings. So using a bit of a comparison, standard sort of weather issues that we get in our network quite often now that we've got the bigger site finished there. So Hastings to Napier, and I'm thinking you've all seen this. This is calling it between Awatoto and Clive. 20 kilometres of track between Hastings and Napier, and it's this site here that's all of our damage. So we repaired a few small things around Timona, around Whakatū, but now it's this area, and I'll go into quite a bit of detail on this in a bit. Just to note, it's going to be multiple months that this work takes us. We're not publicly saying this is the end date because we're so early into the work, but I'll talk you through that in just a bit. And we've got a contractor on site called United Civil, and it's a temporary bridge that we're building to get open. And then we'll follow up with a permanent bridge, likely through the alliance structure that we're in with Waka Kotahi. Just yell out if there's questions, but there could be a few things that I'll explain in a bit more detail as we go. So Napier to Wairoa, we've divided this into, it says 3 sections here, but you'll see it's 4, but there's 3 sections where we've got the main amount of damage. And I'm quite conscious that some of our track isn't publicly accessible or isn't in areas that the public travels to too much. So we're quite hidden from view in some places. But Eskdale, what we're calling 193 to the 200 kilometres, so where you go from State Highway 2 and 5 intersection up to the State Highway 5, it veers off slightly to the west, and we go into the East River Valley. So through Eskdale, it's a massive damage site, and that's pretty publicly visible, so I'm sure you've seen that, or you might have driven through as you go through State Highway 5 up to Taupo. Then we leave not quite the entire sort of public accessible. We go to the East River Valley for just over 20 kilometres. At the top of it's not the top of the East River Valley, sorry, we then branch out to Tūtera after, I think it's Waikawai, and we're following far more alongside State Highway 2 now, but we're not on 100% same alignment as State Highway 2, but visible closer in lots of spots. And these are the areas that we have our main damage, so not the entire length of 116 kilometres, but between Eskdale and Kahika. So I'll just go through those 3 main sections a bit. Eskdale, like I say, you've probably seen, 7 kilometres of track there, a bit north of Napier. We don't have really anything between Eskdale and Napier. The flood didn't get up to our rail corridor. It's a lot of what we call formation damage. So if you compare a road to rail, the asphalt level and such, that's what we're different from. We've got sleepers, ballast, rail. Our formation is the pavement under the asphalt. So that has a lot of damage, a lot of scour. The track's actually been quite badly bent and buckled. That's a guy Taff working on that. It was a piece of straight track that got moved about 100 metres, bent 90 degrees into some of the vineyards next to it. So a lot of rail track damage there, a lot of silt contamination, and that's through all of our ballast. I see. Question?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just trying to understand the level of damage. So I live up the Napier Taupo Road, so travel this frequently, and I've been fortunate to travel the route through to Wairoa in one of the trucks that go on rail.
Rails, yep.
Is the damage so significant that it would warrant moving the rail line, in particular through the valley, or is the base that the rails sit on still solid enough that it's just repairing where there are weaknesses, and therefore value for money says it stays where it is?
Look, it's a really good question, and I don't have the definitive answer to it. You could build back the track where it is. You could build it back on the same horizontal and vertical alignment, but it will still be as vulnerable to these sorts of events as it was before. So that's a decision that we'll be working with others, Waka Kotahi, councils and such, landowners, as to should we stay exactly where we are. At the moment, we would plan on doing plans for returning where we are until we know that there is land or such that we could go otherwise to, and is it worth it? Do we raise the track? That would have implications for neighbours, because those between us and the river or might be detrimental, and those between on the other side, that might be a positive. So we're not decided on that yet. But there's no physical reason. The damage is not significant enough to say you can't build back there, but it's the level of service that we want to provide, the annual exceedance probabilities of outages to future events.
Thank you. And yes, I do acknowledge that wherever it got built in the valley, the risk of such an event would be the same. Thank you.
I note that we're close to State Highway 5. In some places, close as 100 metres apart. In some places, it's our property boundaries are exactly beside each other. State Highway 5 is pretty much over to the hillside, so it doesn't have. Wouldn't have thought it has too much scope to move unless it's going out of Estelle. But yeah, there is potential some scope we could move away from the East River. And we've started moving track where it's in other properties, or moving track where we need to make it safe. Then we leave what's public.
I've got a question on the screen. Mayor Little.
Just one question. When does the line to Wairau become in the same situation as Gisborne, where it's just too expensive to think about replacing it, and you just sit in a state of limbo? Even coming into Wairau, look at it and the cost of all the shingles gone from underneath it, the railway sitting up in the air. It's a big one for you guys, and it's going to come a time when, if we look at alternative routes for the road, that the railway line would be perfect. But we've got to really have some big discussions going forward. That's for sure.
I can answer that to a point, and when I talk about the sections around Wairau, that is what we generally call moderate to minor damage. So she's a bit more full on, well south of Wairau. The piece about using the rail corridor for other use, I'm aware in Bowler, I was living here at the time, that the road bridge got used as the rail bridge got used as a temporary access for road vehicles. The rail access we are a narrow corridor, so we don't take anywhere near as much land use as road. So we're effectively a single lane road for most of where we occupy. If you just look at the picture there, Alice Wallace Road, which is above, so that's the Hastings District Council Road. That's 2 lanes in parts and gets a bit narrow in others. We're more narrow than that, because that's all you need to run a railway. And we have several viaducts. Mohaka Viaduct, I think it's still the highest viaduct in the Southern Hemisphere. That's really only suitable for 1 lane of traffic. So our high rails, which you've travelled on, there's no passing lane through there. And that's the equivalent for lots of the railway. So I remember this from lots of discussions in Auckland Council, and we should take the railway and make it into a road for council use up there, which obviously hasn't happened. But that was a double track corridor, so a much wider corridor than what we have in Hawke's Bay. All that said, we do own land around our corridor and such. But are we going to open up to Wairau? My task is to create a plan for doing that. So the costs and the timing, and then that will go up above for others in our organisation to make that decision. And timeframes for that decision, I don't have just yet, but maybe that's one at the end Dave might have some thoughts on, if there's more questions on that. Should I just keep going and then?
Yeah, just keep going, please.
All right, so going through from East River Valley, like I say, you've got Alice Wallace Road, so that's for about 8 kilometres of the track, and then we get almost completely separate. So you only have rail access and so that's where we use our high rail plant. And it's in a river valley that's similar to this, so quite a narrow area alongside the East River. So access is quite difficult here. We have a lot of access through forestry, and so we've been in touch with forestry firms for utilising that. But access is going to be quite difficult, and we have tunnels through here, so they restrict size of gear we can move around. And we have inspected all of this area, so we're quite aware of our damage. Tūtera to Kahika, this is our biggest single site. So I guess I'd give a comparison in the big washouts that shut Wairoa to Gisborne. This is not as big as that, but it is still pretty significant. We call it an extreme site. We are still open at Portorino, so it's those railway viaducts I mentioned before over the Waikere River. We actually spell it with an I rather than an E. It's just an anomaly of history. But we've been able to provide access across there. We've been in touch with local farming groups and such to provide that access to Waka Kotahi as well. It hasn't been utilised too much, but we have had quite a bit of trespass, so we've had to shut that bridge off because it's not safe to drive road vehicles over. Actually, it's on the Civil Defence website. The utes and such that people were travelling over started breaking the footwalks, and we were nervous someone was going to drop through. It's about a 70-metre drop into the river. So yeah, we are better off than the road in some parts, like here. In other parts, we've got comparable damage.
Back on that photo, I didn't think trains use swing bridges.
Hanging track is something this size is pretty significant for us, but unfortunately we're quite used to these sorts of bits of damage. But yeah, it just shows rail's pretty strong. Yeah, some of that rail will date back from this, 60s, 50s, so it lasts a long time too. Then we're going up to Wairoa, and we've only got the one major damage site around the 230k, so Tūtera's at about the 225. So that 60, 70 k's north of Tūtera, it's what we call moderate minor damage. If that was all we had, probably wouldn't be presenting to you, probably because we'd be out there getting it all fixed. But we no longer have staff based in Wairoa. We have used some contractors, and we've used some of our Bay of Plenty staff to come down. But we've inspected all of this section as well. And what we've done with that, someone asked about the scale of damage. So things that we've developed over the years, and it was quite heavily used in Kaikoura, was we've got a damage standard. We're actually going to be working with other infrastructure providers or trying to create an NZS standard for these things so that everyone has comparable damage assessments. We make heavy use of mobile applications and such, your iPhones, your iPads, those sorts of things, with apps to record this damage, and lots of use of LiDAR, which is giving us full 3D models, and drones for picking up damage. So we've completed all of our damage inspections between Palmerston North and Wairoa. We've GIS mapped it. And this is, you can see the dots here, the colours of them, they correspond to the assessment on the previous page. And tools are always developing and getting cleverer. So Kaikoura, we had this information, but nowhere near as accessible, nowhere near as quickly. And we've done that through a lot of people on the ground, but a lot of the use of drones and other digital surveying tools. So we can look up what our damage is and the scale of it and such everywhere. And then we are creating 3D models of this. So I think one is at the two on my left, that's about our 215 kilometres, so just up the East River Valley, near some forestry works. A 3D model that we've got of that. The other one that's the intersection between State Highway 5, State Highway 2, and the railway line. Oh, there we go. Railway line just goes underneath us here. And so some pretty significant damage through all of that area. I'll just say, so what are we doing with it now? We've got people engaged for doing conceptual work, working out how long, how much things will take to do, what sort of materials we'll use, and then pushing that sort of information into the alliance with Waka Kotahi and those contractors to get us underway as quick as we can. A difference between our network and the state highway will be open to Napier. I'll come to that at some point. But then we've got to get open to Wairoa. And whereas State Highway Network is with the Bailey bridges and such, open but needing recovery work done still. So our next goal is getting open. So just on one of the big pieces of...
Chair?
Yes.
Can I just make a comment around these areas? Given the vulnerability of both the State Highway and the Kiwi Rail link, and the isolation that those communities have had over the last 3 months, when infrastructure is rebuilt, it would be beneficial if there can be, for example, a walking path. And I use the Waikari Viaduct as an example. It would have been brilliant if we could have blocked vehicles because it's not built for road vehicles, but had a safe system of people being able to walk over it, or even if it was quad bikes. But to have that in the back of the mind, that as these structures are redesigned, is therefore minimal cost and additionality that can be added to them. So I just sort of throw that up as an idea as part of your design outputs.
Yeah, look, that cycleways and such have been built in other areas of the rail network. The Waikari one is it's actually about a 4 kilometre section between where it intersects with the road and where it intersects with the road. So quite a decent area and through farmland. But yeah, we'll work with other stakeholder groups and such as to how we rebuild. A key piece, I guess, is we're insured, and so what our insurance covers is a part of what we can rebuild to. And we'll be working with government as to extra funding and such for not just building back the network to what it was.
Additional comment through, Mr. Chair? And anyway, in the very short term, Linda, we're going to have a NZTA bridge, just whipping over that little gorge, just like that, over the Waikari Gorge, aren't we? We're going to have an NZTA road. Over the Waikari Just like that.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Just like that. I'm just wondering what I'm committing to by saying yes.
That we are planning for
quite
potential. No, it's more than a potential.
Realignment. Yeah. We've got to get over it.
Well said, thank you.
So I thought I've got a few slides about some really public work that we're doing to get open to Napier. So this is where we're alongside State Highway 51 between Clive and Awatoto. So I've shown these two slides, it's a bit of context to why we're doing what we're doing. So you've got the Tutaikuri, it's not its original where it was, because Tutaikuri used to come, I think, through Ahuriri back in pre-1936, but it was then relocated down to south of Awatoto. Part of it's around the 1931 earthquake, the uplift, but part of it was flooding was already happening before that. So 1936, it was taken through here, and that's part of the Tutaikuri. But it's actually called the Waitangi Washout Bridge because it was the Waitangi stream in the 1897 flood caused a washout of the railway. Railways built about 1870. Those 1890 floods washes out, and so we build a bridge called the Waitangi Washout Bridge. So that's this one here. We actually know our bridges by numbers as well, so to us it's called Bridge 217. This is pre-cyclone and post. Tutaikuri is now in the 1960s. The Catchment Board diverts the Tutaikuri to come to the Nararoa under what we call Bridge 216. And so that's the main flows. So this is only about 15% of the Tutaikuri comes through here. Come Cyclone Gabriel, massive amount came through. And so that washed our bridge out. It's a 21 span bridge, and it's washed 5 spans away, and we've had to take a 6 down. I give that because it's not the whole bridge. It's about a 260 metre long bridge, and 60 metres of it washed out. The bridge is actually function quite well as protection for the Whakakitahi State Highway 51 bridge. That's also a 1930s bridge built same
Are
sort
you
of
going to
time.
go knocking?
Oh, we're definitely in touch and working together on these things. The stop bank here was blown out, and so obviously there's been the flooding around Awatoto. So we're unsure about what the permanent solution is for this area, because us rebuilding permanent just by ourselves isn't necessarily the right solution for the area. So that'll be something that with the Alliance and others that we're looking at, what's the right solution overall. But we need to get open to Napier. Napier Port's a key customer. Obviously Napier Port relies on rail a lot, so we're building a temporary bridge to get open to Napier. Temporary bridges, people ask me, are they like Bailey bridges? Not quite. Or actually, I'll show a bit more of the damage. So it's not just the bridge. This is Peter here. The area between the two bridges was massively washed out, so our embankment, a lot of wood debris across our bridge. And so we've been removing all of that wood debris, prepping the site, cutting back the rail that's been, we lost three bridge spans in there into the river that we haven't yet found. We've got three of the other ones back, so we've got to still go fishing for them. And we've removed all of our track through the damaged area. And it actually looks a whole lot better now that we've got the debris off. But that all needs rebuilding, and a temporary bridge. So we have something called second-hand spans. The railway used to be about 6,000 kilometres around New Zealand, and it's now approximately 4,000, maybe a bit under. So as we've discontinued lines elsewhere, we've kept the second-hand rail spans, and a lot of them are the same. So these are 40-foot spans, and we're able to reuse them. We're bringing them down from Hamilton next week to Eastbridge over in Pandora. And we'll modify those spans to be able to be used here. We'll cut one in half to get two 20-footers, and then we put 5 40-foot spans and two 20s in place. And we put temporary piles down as a hit and miss, because we have the old piles to miss in the river. And we do that because we can do it far quicker, 12 months to 18 months quicker than trying to design, consent and build a completely new bridge. And we're not 100% sure what a completely new bridge would need in this area, but we know a temporary bridge will get us open to Napier. So that's the main piece of what we're doing. And these are from a few days ago. United Civil are now on site. They've established, and the crane's actually built. I saw the crane getting put together yesterday. Sorry, one of their two cranes, the drilling crane. And they're going to start piling into the river hopefully next week. So that will be very public. Everyone driving between Hastings and Napier sees it. So it's going to be one of our more public jobs. And just something that we are doing. So this is all of the temporary pile casings that we've brought up from another job that we've deferred down south. And we've put all those casings on a train at Belfast and brought them to Hastings. We still have to truck them from Hastings because we're not open to Napier yet. But we're massively looking to use rail as a way of moving stuff, and we do that anyway. So the only way of moving 75-metre lengths of rail is by rail. Moving aggregate, it's something that we did in Kaikoura a lot. We worked with Whakakitahi, we moved Whakakitahi materials and such, and yeah, we'll be trying to do that as well, because I know driving on the roads at the moment, with the couple of bridges out, there's a lot more stress on the roading network. So we're incentivised to use it for ourselves. We'll be incentivised to try and use it for others too. Last bit, and I think this might be my last slide. The next piece of work before we're into rebuilding is we've got to make our corridors safe for our neighbours. This being Whakakitahi's bridge, which is just upstream of us at Munns Creek at the top of Estdale. It's got to get all the slash off this bridge, and so we're working with Whakakitahi on that. If another fresh comes down, if we get another storm, that debris is going to be a problem. We have a lot of debris in our own bridges that we'll be trying to remove. Estdale, we've got a lot of drainage paths and such that have been getting opened, but these paths only work if we get them through the whole area. And a really big one is this wasn't a lake or a pond before the event. We've got culverts that have been blocked up with debris. This is actually blowing out now, so it's a major damage site for us. We've got to prevent that happening in other places, so getting into some of our less accessible areas and unblocking culverts, removing material around bridges before we get in and fix them.
So where is that one?
This one.
The bottom left.
This is Waipunga, between Waipunga and Waikowai.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the area that there's only rail access, with forestry and native bush around us.
Oh, sorry. I've got 2 questions on the wall. We'll go once again, priority to our Mayor Little.
Hey, just one question. Your railway bridge in Wairoa that crosses the Wairau River.
Yep.
A little bit of anxiety there. That's filled with slash and that still, and that was quite a contributor to the river height because it built up behind it, and there was 2 different levels, the top side and the bottom side. When do you think you'll get to there to pull off all the slash off your bridge and around it?
Yeah, in the next couple of months. I've been over the bridge. We've got videos of what it was like during the storm. Yeah, so we're aware of any bridge we've got. They have an impact on the river. Just like Bowler, it survived pretty well, and so the main piece is getting the debris off that one. It's not got anywhere near the damage as others. So next couple of months.
Cool. Would you be able to send me those videos?
Yeah, look, they're actually from a member of public, not one of our workforce. I'll have a think with our people just because it's yeah, I'd need to go back to the person that sent it to me.
That'd be good.
To check if they're okay with it going out.
Councillor
Yep,
Williams.
cool. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I'm going to have to bug out after I share the following few thoughts. I just wanted to firstly thank Daniel and David for being with us today, and to KiwiRail for all of the effort and investment that is going back into rebuilding our rail lifeline. It's a pity that Angus wasn't with us in the workshop this morning. We haven't had a representative from KiwiRail at our Transport Committee during my term on the council since 2019, and we really do need you guys around the table with us. It was impressed upon us when KiwiRail came up to Napier last year just how important it is that KiwiRail and the Transport Committees work together to ensure that your rail network investment plans align with our regional land transport plans in the bid for funding through the National Land Transport Fund. That is all the more underscored now in our resilience and recovery planning. The whole focus of our workshop this morning was ensuring that we look at recovery across all transport modes. And so when Mayor Craig asked questions about, can we use the rail corridor for a road, we actually need to look at that whole issue holistically, and perhaps both modes need to be on that corridor in places. It's moving the road to the rail in places, it's moving the rail to the road in others, I don't know. My point is we must work together on this, and we really do urge your direct involvement and participation in a committee from this point as we work through our recovery plans and our next regional transport plan. So thank you for being here today, but it is really important that we stay connected on all of this for the future. What you've put on the table here is the immediate. One of the principles that we talked about this morning for recovery is that we act now, but with an eye to the future. So the fact that you're repairing these bridges, I don't think is the end of the story. It just gets us back into the place where we can look at that longer term, multimodal, resilient, overall transport solution for future generations in Hawke's Bay. That's got to be the focus. My last point, and it's a parting shot, you may not, as KiwiRail, have Gisborne to Napier or Gisborne to Wairoa firmly on your agenda, but we beg to differ. There are those in both communities of Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay who very much see that as still live and still important. So I'm not dropping that myself, but I appreciate that in the immediate sense there are some very big fish to fry, and you're doing some excellent work to get us back up and running and get the port connected by rail both in the north and south. I just wanted to share those bigger points to put the presentation in context. Again, to thank you for being here today, and we look forward to seeing more of Angus around our committee table in future meetings. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to need to bug out at this point. I absolutely have to go, I'm afraid. But it's been a long and productive, I think, day overall.
Thank you.
So I was just going to say I'll finish up, but I was going to see if Dave wanted to add anything to what
Yeah, actually, I was watching for any response. Finish off first, and then we'll have. Unless David, would you like to respond to that while Martin's still live?
Well, look, absolutely. I mean, Dan's point is the valid one. We are insured to reinstate, so that is what we can afford to do. A decision on sort of the multimodal transport resilience and an extension to Gisborne, all the rest of those things will be a region to government discussion, will be part of that. But we don't have it within our gift at the moment to say, yes, that will be part of our consideration. It'll be bigger than us. But we're quite willing to be part of that dialogue.
Thank you. Thumbs up for Martin. Good. Proceed, Daniel. Thank you.
I was finished. This is a shot from Estelle. We've actually cleaned this bit up, but it just shows the massive nature of the damage. So I've been involved in quite a few rail projects and not seen our water do that to rail tracks. So yeah, and in some ways that can look worse than it is. So that piece through Estelle, we have some confidence that we'll be able to get that worked through pretty quick. Some of the other bigger washouts and stuff in the East River Valley, they'll be a bit more of a challenge. So some of what you can see is not as bad, and some of what you can't see probably is.
Good, thank you. Well, as a chair, and being Friday afternoon, we talked about Friday afternoon quite a bit. It's been a really good presentation, and thank you very much for the informative and especially the pictures that came with it, with the words. Have been enlightening that we weren't actually aware of. We've heard about it, but we actually could see it. So thank you very much for doing that.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I was just going to say thank you for being here as well. It would be great to have Kiwi Rail here on a more regular basis and continue the conversation and the updates. It's great. Thank you.
Look, maybe just in the case of Angus, possibly beg a little bit of forgiveness this week. It's probably been the worst week in terms of events that I can recall in recent memory. So he was just simply swamped with the Aratiri, the incident in Auckland this morning and the incidents during Wellington during the week. He would normally be in attendance.
Fully understand that. Yep. Thank you very much. Apology accepted. Any other questions or comments regarding the presentation? Otherwise, a common consent that we accept the presentation from Kiwi Rail. And thank you very much. Then we go to our last item, which is the verbal updates from advisory reps. Have we got any?
We've got David.
I'll leave at this point. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you, David, for your attendance.
Jane, I was just actually a bit nervous about leaving that up. Is the parting thing? I'll take it off.
Hey, thanks so much.
David.
Okay. Well, I think I was looking at just an opportunity to say thank you to so many people, really, on behalf of the people we represent, and that's people who walk, cycle, drive or ride. And just like to acknowledge Waka Kotahi, the Regional Council, District Councils and City Councils and the staff and the contractors for their monumental efforts restoring the infrastructure. It's our fundamental access to mobility, and we're truly grateful. So thank you very much again for all the hard work. And that's me.
Thank you.
Well said.
Great. Anyone else?
Along a similar line, just a very brief thank you. This is the first representation we've had at this committee for some time, and we really appreciate from a Te Whatu Ora and a health perspective to be around the table here with you all. I think, there's just massive gains in health to be made through good transport systems, and a lot of the dialogue that we had this morning around community resilience and community wellbeing and livable cities is all driven through this committee. So no other sort of formal updates from me, but just wonderful to be around the table.
Great, excellent, thank you. And we hope that you will continue to contribute and put your weight behind some of the discussions that we're going to have in time. Okay. Freight, do you normally give a...
Normally do. I think everything's been said. I was just saying to Linda there earlier that none of us appreciate limited access as such, or one way, or whatever, until we've endured no access for as long as we have. So quite commendable that the teams that have been rebuilding the road and or rail have got it through as early as they have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. What else have we got?
Nicholas from Nippy Port.
Nicholas.
I just turned my camera on. You are. So I think it's just a continuation on the presentation from Daniel, actually from Kirill, just to acknowledge obviously the effort they've done to reconnecting partially to Hastings, which from the 3rd of April, which we've been using straight away in terms of starting moving freight from central North Island to back to the port. It does involve a bit of a road bridging operation from Hastings to Napier port, but it does remove some of the trucks on this longer journey. And the other point is we continue to work with Kirill on extension of the services, and that means obviously with reconnecting to the Napier port itself, but also looking at what other sort of services we could re-engage. Because if you remember, before the cyclone, there was not just one train a day, but there was multiple trains and logs and different commodities on it. So we definitely working on this, and with different cargo owners to try and put that cargo back onto rail and remove it from road when appropriate.
Good, thank you. Okay, on that note, we're done for today. Once again, it's been a long day, but very productive, as Martin has indicated. And so I'm going to move to close the meeting and ask Api if he would like to lead us in karakia.
Yeah, Te Māori ora. Yes, this has certainly been a very vibrant hui today. And thank you, Martin, for session 1 this morning, and thank you to you, Jeff, for this afternoon. I think you've made it quite vibrant. Yes, and thank you, Daniel, once again, that amazing but devastating report of yours. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, I'll do the benediction. I'm Anglican, you would have known, and so we have the benediction, and I'll do it in English and then Māori. Descend upon us the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, now and forevermore. Amen. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, the ata whai to tātou ariki a ihu kreiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga teitanga o te wairua tapu, ake. Amen.
Amen. Kia ora. Thank you. Okay, meeting's closed.